Welcome to the WalterFootball.com podcast. This is episode 410. We're doing a 2023 NFL mock draft. The draft is a month away. Hard to believe it. So I figured we'd do a mock draft, and we have a three-man mock today, joined once again by Jacob Camenker from the Sporting News. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to this mock. Feel way more up to speed on the prospects than our first mock, as I always do. So interested to see how this thing's going to change. It's going to be a fun year in the draft with so many good quarterbacks potentially going in the top 10.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see how different this mock is compared to the first one we did a few weeks ago. And our special guest, Charlie Campbell, senior NFL draft analyst at WalterFootball.com, the best NFL draft analyst on the internet. Charlie, how are you?
Great. How you guys doing?
Awesome. It's great to have Charlie on to do this mock draft. We're going to go in order. I'm going to start with pick one, then Jacob will do two, and Charlie will do three. And if you guys are listening, feel free to please leave some comments or questions. We'll get to them afterward. It will be too difficult to get to the questions during the mock, and it'll kind of disrupt the flow anyway. But we'll answer everything after the mock. Before we begin, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. All that mean a lot. We also have a merch store in the description. When you can see Charlie is wearing the free Gruden t-shirt that you can get there. You can get other shirts there as well. And also we're sponsored by Stochastic. There's a link in the description as well. You can use promo code WalterFootball for 25% off. It's the best DFS website out there. It's amazing. I've been with them for 4 years. I've won several tournaments with them just using their data. They have projections. They have ownership data. They even have a lineup generator. So even if you're kind of overwhelmed, don't have much time, you could use their lineup generator, make a lineup. Someone won $50,000 using this thing. So highly recommend it. Stochastic, using promo code WalterFootball for 25% off. All right. Let's get to the mock draft. I have the first pick. I won it fair and square using a complicated method that I won't reveal on this broadcast. But the first pick, so I talked about this on the After Dark show last night when I revealed my mock draft that I updated on the site. So I think the pick right now is going to be CJ Stroud. Now, this could change. But I know that Josh McCown, the quarterback's coach for the Panthers, is a big fan of CJ Stroud. That doesn't mean they're going to draft him, but why would you trade up all the way from 9 to 1 if your quarterback's coach isn't as much of a fan as the other guy? I figure like CJ Stroud is just like I feel like he's the safer prospect of the two with Bryce Young. Bryce Young is small, like Kyler Murray type size, and we've seen Murray not be able to last the full season. Maybe you could say you could say Young might be a little bit better than Stroud, but I think Stroud's safer. And given that Josh McCown likes him, I think CJ Stroud is the pick. So I'm going to adjust that on the ticker at the bottom. And Jacob, you're up with pick number 2.
Yeah, and I think Stroud will be the first pick too. He just fits that Frank Reich offense really well. So I think the Texans are going to take whoever the Panthers don't take of Young and Stroud. So in that case, it's going to be Bryce Young. Look, the Texans need a franchise quarterback. They played it the right way last season. Davis Mills showed some promise as a rookie, so they gave him a chance to prove himself. He didn't do that, so now they're going to get their franchise guy. Bryce Young, you mentioned Kyler Murray. He's definitely similar in size to Murray, but playing style-wise, he reminds me so much of Russell Wilson, just how he plays, how he throws the ball, his tendency to, move around outside the pocket, but he's never looking to run. He's looking to make plays downfield. And I'm not talking about Russell Wilson from last year, just to be clear. I mean the guy we saw the first 10 years in Seattle. So I think Bryce Young has a chance to be a really, really good starting quarterback. The one knock on him is the size, but he plays bigger than his size indicates because he has a throwing motion that releases the ball very high above his head, similar to Russell Wilson. So I think the Texans will be happy to land him here. And this might have been the guy they were going to go with number 1 overall. So, hey, maybe it doesn't end up being such a bad thing that they got the number 2 overall pick, even though it came with some risk.
And at 3rd overall, I'll have the Cardinals take Will Anderson, the pass rusher from Alabama. Arizona badly needs a difference maker in their front 7, losing Chandler Jones and J.J. Watt in back-to-back off seasons. Will Anderson is a really safe player. You saw 3 seasons of good tape at Alabama. While he isn't overwhelmingly fast or overwhelmingly strong or big, he's just a good football player with phenomenal instincts, developed pass rush repertoire. And I think for the Cardinals, with a new GM, new coaching staff, they need to get this pick right. Tyree Wilson might have a little bit more upside, but there's also more risk there because he's not as instinctive as Will Anderson. You haven't seen the caliber of production out of him over the span of time that Will Anderson produced. So, and then Jalen Carter, you have the off the field issues. And I think with a new regime that needs to get started on the right foot, that Anderson makes a lot more sense.
So the Colts are on the clock at number 4, and I think this is going to be a quarterback either way. And I say either way because there might be a trade with Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. So the Colts have been the only team that hasn't rejected the thought of trading for Jackson, and I think it kind of makes sense. They may not like one of Will Levis or Anthony Richardson available, and I think this pick is going to be Anthony Richardson. I think he has more upside than Will Levis. Will Levis definitely has more upside as well. They both have low floors. But if the Ravens trade into the spot via the Lamar Jackson trade, I think he's more likely to be the pick as well. So I think it's pretty safe to project Anthony Richardson at number 4. He's kind of you could say he's like Lamar Jackson and also Tyler Huntley. So I think there's a chance Will Levis slips in the draft. We'll have to see, but I think Richardson is very likely to go number 4.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling right now as well. I just look at his upside is just so immense. And going to a team like the Colts, who has Gardner Minshew, who can start this year if they were like really like, hey, we can't really put Richardson on the field yet. Minshew's not a bad backup option there. So definitely like that. Think Levis could slip as well. Seattle's on the clock here. I think if Richardson were on the clock here, Seattle might think about a quarterback, but I don't really think they're going to do that either way. So I'm going to give them one of the best defensive players on the board. I'm actually going to go Tyree Wilson here. You mentioned the off-the-field concerns for Jalen Carter, Charlie. I think those will cause him to fall a little bit. Obviously, as we get closer to the draft, teams might become a little more comfortable with them. But he had that arrest, and then he didn't work out well at all at his pro day. So I think that's going to scare some teams off. And I know the Seahawks have given guys second chances before, but I think they'll look at a guy like Wilson who's really explosive off the edge. He has all those cliches of like he's got great bend, he's got fluid hips, everything that you can look for in a guy who comes off the edge. So I know he's dealing with a foot injury, but sounds like he'll be cleared ahead of the draft. So I think Seattle goes for the athletic upside and just adds to that pass rush, which is really their biggest need this offseason.
And at 6, the Lions are a really interesting pick because this pick doesn't really kind of fit a lot of the needs on the roster, and they've really done a great job of shoring up needs. So they don't enter the draft with just absolute crushing issue like, say, cornerback was a few months ago, but they signed Cam Sutton, Emmanuel Mosley, CJ Gardner-Johnson. So they really added to the secondary there. And I think Jalen Carter would definitely be in the mix if it weren't for the character, but I just don't think that fits the Dan Campbell culture that they're building in Detroit. I think Tyree Wilson would get consideration, but they took Aiden Hutchinson last year. They also took Josh Pascal in the second round. Houston, the other rookie, had 8 sacks and barely played last season. And they have Charles Harris, the Aquara brothers as well. So they're pretty loaded there on the edge with talent and depth. So, but one thing that Brad Holmes did when he was with the Rams was he drafted Todd Gurley, and Todd Gurley helped get Jared Goff to a Super Bowl. So I think that with this pick, they could go for a 2-headed monster, grab Bijan Robinson, pair him with David Montgomery. Bijan Robinson could be a dynamite receiver in Ben Johnson's offense. I think he's obviously been durable at Texas, but more reliable, sturdily built than DeAndre Swift, who's in the last year of his contract, and they could trade Swift if they wanted to as well. So I have the Lions going with Bijan Robinson right now.
I'm a big fan of that pick. I usually don't like running backs in the first round, but it seems like teams that take running backs aren't in position to take them because they're rebuilding. But the Lions, I feel like, are ready to compete for a Super Bowl now. And Bijan Robinson gives them the best chance to get there. So I love that pick. So the Raiders are on the clock at 7. I've been taking on my site, I haven't taken Christian Gonzalez, but Jalen Carter is available here. I had him going to Seattle on the site. I looked at the Raiders depth chart, and their starting defensive tackles are Bilal Nichols and Jerry Tillery, which just not good, especially Tillery, who's just been a brutal player since being a first-round bust. I think Jalen Carter just gives him a huge upgrade there. I know he had the arrest at the combine. He had some off the field stuff too, some locker room issues, and he worked out poorly in his pro day, as Jacob just said. But he has such great tape. He's such a fantastic player. I feel like the Raiders might think, hey, we'll coach this guy up. He's going to be a Pro Bowler for us for a decade. And if they hit with him, I mean, that's going to take their pass rush to another level because they have Max Crosby on the outside. And so I think that is really going to improve their defensive line. Chandler Jones is the other guy. So, yeah, I think Jalen Carter is the pick here at 7. I don't suspect he's going to fall unless teams really think that he's going to be an issue off the field, which I don't know. I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah, and I'll say I was thinking Atlanta was going to take Jalen Carter if the Raiders didn't. So now Atlanta's in a little bit of a tougher spot here because the top defensive linemen are off the board. They probably would have liked to land Tyree Wilson here if they could. Jalen Carter would have been a nice consolation prize for them. But I'm looking at their roster, and I'm having trouble finding a true need that matches the board here. So this looks like a spot they could trade down from. I think they could just go best player available, though. I don't know whether they would view that as a guy like Peter Skoronski, who could play guard early in his career and eventually shift out to tackle once Jake Matthews' career is over, or Christian Gonzalez, who could do the same for Casey Hayward. But I'm going to go with Skoronski here because I'm more confident that he's going to be the first offensive tackle off the board. And I think his ability to play 5 positions might have, Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot look at that and say, hey, wow, like we can get this guy, we can play him at guard this year, improve our offensive line. And next year, if Jake Matthews decides to call it quits, or if either him or Caleb McGarry regresses, we can bump him out to tackle. So I'm going to go with Skoronski here, but definitely the Falcons will be hoping one of those defensive linemen makes it to their pick.
And with the Bears, I think they follow suit and grab Paris Johnson, a left tackle from Ohio State, one of the spots that they really didn't address in free agency, but they definitely need to provide better protection for Justin Fields. Paris Johnson has a good skill set, and I know just from talking with team sources last night, they love the character. They love the kid as well. He's intelligent, versatile. You could start him out at right tackle or guard and then move him to left tackle. They think he has that 3-position ability. So I think he makes a lot of sense for Chicago at 9.
Okay, so I'm on the clock. The Eagles at 10. I think this is Bijan Robinson if he's still available. Now he's gone. So I think they draft Lucas Van Ness. I have him. I have that on the site as well. The Eagles are never going to shy away from drafting a defensive lineman or offensive lineman. They have Brandon Graham there, who's going to be aging out soon. They were without him for most of 2021, so they kind of know how that's going to go. Their pass rush really struggled. Without Brandon Graham on the field in 2021. So I think they're going to need another edge rusher coming up. And they brought in Lucas Van Ness for a visit. He was amazing at the combine, a lot more athletic than I think the people anticipated. And so I think that makes him live, I think, for the 10th pick overall. I could see him going as high as 8 even. Not sure if Atlanta will take him at 8, but I think that's his ceiling here for this draft. So I think 10, not the craziest value. Like I said, I think the Eagles want Bijan Robinson, but 10, I think Lucas Van Ness makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I thought about him for Atlanta, but I didn't think he was the best player on the board. He makes a lot more sense in Philadelphia. I mean, they call the guy Hercules, I think is his nickname. So that tells you everything you need to know about him. Now, Tennessee's on the clock at 11. I'm going to pencil in Will Levis here. The Titans may not go for a quarterback, but I have trouble finding a landing spot for Levis outside of this. So, if he doesn't go here, he could slip to the latter stages of the round, and then a team might trade up to get him, or maybe the Buccaneers would scoop him. But you just look at the Titans. They have a new regime in the front office. Mike Vrabel's obviously still there, but I don't think they're overly pleased with Ryan Tannehill. They're just kind of keeping him because they don't have another option right now. And Malik Willis was a 3rd-round pick last year, but he was bad enough that they signed Josh Dobbs basically off the streets or off the Cleveland practice squad to start over him in a win-or-go-home game. So I kind of think the Titans don't have a lot of faith in the quarterback situation. If they look at Will Levis and say, hey, we like this guy, we can develop him, I think they might take a shot on it and just say, if he needs time, we got Tannehill there. He can play this year with Derrick Henry, and we can just try to win with defense in the run like we usually do. But, if they think he's better than Tannehill at this point, they could also throw him in, and he'll have enough support from Henry that, he won't get shellacked every start despite not having the greatest protection or receivers. So I'm going to go Levis here, but if he doesn't go here, he could slide.
I'll have the Texans take Quentin Johnston here with the 12th pick. And I think after trading Brandon Cooks, they're going to be in the market for a receiver. This isn't a deep receiver draft. So if they wait till the second round, they might not really like the options there. Johnston would give Bryce Young a big receiver that can play on the outside. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba would get consideration, but he's really elite as a slot receiver, and he's okay and it could be a good starter on the outside, but he's really elite in the slot, and that's an easier position to fill in the draft from year to year, finding a speedy slot receiver. But Quentin Johnston has rare size speed combination. And I think if you're looking for a big wideout that can be kind of a safety net guy to throw the ball up to, he would make sense there for the Texans at 12.
Okay, I think the Jets could take a receiver as well here. Actually, Smith-Njigba makes sense. So I'm not going to have them take him, though. I'm going to have them go offensive lineman. Broderick Jones it seems like someone that Joe Douglas has drafted over the years, like a huge upside guy who has a kind of a floor, because Jones, I think, is a bit raw. But we've seen Joe Douglas swing for the fences a lot in the draft, and recently it's worked out like wonderfully. And I think that he might do that again. Last year, the Jets had Elijah Vera Tucker starting at left tackle. It's not ideal at all. I mean, he did a fine job, but he's much better at guard. I think they want to shore up their tackle position, especially with Aaron Rodgers coming there. They need to protect their 40-year-old quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is not going to run away from anyone at this stage of his career. So I suspect they're going to draft a tackle early and also a center early. I think with two of their top three picks, they have 2 picks in the top 43. I think left tackle and then center, and then the other pick will probably be either receiver, safety, or linebacker. So I like Broderick Jones here to the Jets at 13.
Yeah, speaking of offensive tackles, that's probably the position I'm going to have the Patriots take. I mocked them Jackson Smith-Njigba last time, but they signed Juju Smith-Schuster, and they're both slot types. So I don't know that they're going to take Smith-Njigba here. And, Christian Gonzalez is still on the board, so maybe Belichick would take him, but he's preferred smaller defensive backs in recent years. So I don't know that he would necessarily take Gonzalez here. So I'm going to go with Darnell Wright from Tennessee. He's a guy who's been getting a lot of attention lately. He performed very well against Alabama earlier in the season, blocked well against Will Anderson, and he's just a rock-solid player. And he strikes me as a plug-and-play starter at right tackle, and the Patriots have a very big hole there right now. They're currently slated to have a competition between Connor McDermott, Riley Reif, and Calvin Anderson for that position. All those guys are probably better served as swing tackles. Wright would give them a lot of upside, and we know Belichick loves to upgrade the offensive line. He spent a first-round pick on Cole Strange last year, so I could see Darnell Wright being the pick here, and I'll have to see how his measurables stack up with other tackle picks of the Patriots from the past, but I don't know. I just get the vibe that Belichick's going to try to take a player that he views as safe, and I think that might be right here.
With the Packers at the 15th pick, I'll have them take Brian Branch, the safety from Alabama. Obviously, safety's been a big weakness for Green Bay over the past few seasons. And Branch brings versatility in that he can play slot nickel corner as well as be a safety that's close to the line, or you can play him deep, really instinctive football player. And I think the other need I would consider for them would be tight end, but I think if you look at their kind of draft as a whole, as a pair, they could get better value by taking a safety in the first round, getting the top safety in the draft, and then getting tight end help in the second round, because this is a really good tight end draft. So there should be some quality options there for them on day 2, where safety, there's a pretty big drop off after Brian Branch. So I have Green Bay taking Branch.
I suspect the Redskins at 16, they're kind of heartbroken that Branch didn't get to them. I've been mocking Branch to them for like five months now. So it's not like inside info. It's just it's a need. Maybe you could say he's best player available, and they love their Alabama prospects. Like they've taken nothing but Alabama prospects. 16 to the Redskins though. Christian Gonzalez is somehow available. I think he can go as high as 6 or 7. And there's a chance like players always fall inexplicably, and this is not any sort of reason, it just happened that way. But yeah, I mean, Washington has had documented issues at cornerback. They could finally really fix those with Christian Gonzalez, who as some would argue is the top cornerback in this class.
Yeah, I considered Gonzalez with each of my last 3 picks, including number 8 for Atlanta. So getting him at 16 seems like a great value for Washington. We'll probably continue the run on corners here at 17. The Steelers could use one. I know they signed Patrick Peterson, but he's getting a little long in the tooth. And they also lost Cam Sutton and just could use some extra depth in their secondary. And Joey Porter Jr. is on the board. And we all know how good Joey Porter Sr. was during his NFL days. Pretty sure he played most of his career with the Steelers. I don't know for a fact because I don't think, born from all of his career. But yeah, Joey Porter Jr., really good cornerback. He could be a number 1 guy, learning alongside Patrick Peterson. Could be great for his development. And it just seems like a Steelers move to take Joey Porter Jr. here after, employing his father. They're a team that really likes its tradition. We saw that when they picked Kenny Pickett last year because they had passed on a good Pitt quarterback, and Dan Marino didn't want to make the same mistake. So maybe they see Joey Porter Jr. and they go for him here. I could also see them going with Jordan Addison if Kenny Pickett gets a bug in their ear and says, hey, get me this guy. I want him as a number 1 receiver. But I think they're in better shape at receiver than corner. So we'll go Joey Porter Jr.
Yeah, and Detroit, again, interesting spot. I think there's a lot of good options for them at 18, and I think this is a spot they could move down, and I think in some ways probably easier for them to move down from 18 than it would be from 6 in the top 10. And I think options they could consider here would be Jack Campbell. They could really use a linebacker to go with Alex Anzalone. Malcolm Rodriguez was a nice rookie, but has some size limitations, durability concerns. I think they could look at tight end as well. Dalton Kincaid or Mayer or Sam Laporta, I think could be options. So they have good ones there, but I do think cornerback will still be something that they're going to look to address in the first couple rounds. So I'd have them take Devon Witherspoon, the cornerback from Illinois. The one thing that I've heard from teams with Witherspoon is, they're concerned about the size and durability with him, and he plays so physical. He just throws his body around with reckless abandon. So there's concern about him holding up in the NFL, avoiding injury. And that could cause him to slide, along with that he hasn't worked out yet. I know some teams are kind of getting a little frustrated and antsy because they want to know the speed. They have some deep speed questions with him. So I think it's really important for his draft stock to run before the draft. Otherwise, he could be in store for a serious slide come draft day. So right now, I'll go with Witherspoon, but keep checking back with us because we'll be getting info on that and where teams have him, as we get closer over these final few weeks.
It's crunch time, or at least getting there. So yeah, looking forward to all that. We're going to have so many reports on the website from Charlie in this final month leading up to the draft. The Buccaneers are on the clock at number 19. I think this is a difficult pick to make. I think the Buccaneers are another team that could move down. But if they stay at 19, I think this is going to be a pick that's maybe unusual. I have them taking Jahmyr Gibbs, the second running back in this class. Now, I won't like this as much as the Detroit pick because Tampa is, without Tom Brady, a lot further away from winning the Super Bowl than the Lions are. It feels weird to say that, but it's definitely true. Now Baker Mayfield is going to start at quarterback, hypothetically, unless Kyle Trask wins the job. So they're not going to have much offense. I know they have the receiver still, but they're not going to be able to throw the ball that much. So I think they're going to understand that they need to run the ball extremely well. And Rashad White was pretty mediocre as a rookie last year. It wasn't great. Leonard Fournette is gone. Not that they're going to miss him much anyway. And then they signed Chase Edmonds, and he's not going to preclude them from taking a running back here. So I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is. I think Charlie reported this a few weeks ago during the combine that a lot of teams had him graded very highly, but he might be pushed down because he's a running back. But still, 19 seems fine for like a top five, arguably a top five prospect in this class. It's just that, it doesn't really make much sense for the Buccaneers. So I'll even if this happens, despite me mocking it, I'll grade it poorly. But I think the Buccaneers could go down this path and take a running back.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me because that would help support, Trask or Mayfield in theory, but in practice that might not work out. I get to be on the clock for the Seahawks again. I got both Seahawks picks last time, and I got them both this time as well. I will not go double defensive end this time, though. I think the Seahawks always are a team that could surprise, so I could see them taking Will McDonald this early as just a pure edge pass rusher who was playing at defensive tackle last year, basically. But I think they'll go receiver, given the guys on the board here. They really don't have a third option aside from DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. It's been like that long term, and Lockett's getting older too, so he may not continue at this high level for all that much longer. So Smith and Jigba is still on the board, so I'm going to give him to the Seahawks because he'll play in the slot. Tyler Lockett and Metcalf will play on the outside. And I know that Lockett can play on the inside too, but I think it just gives you a little more flexibility in what you can do with all those guys. And I think Geno Smith will appreciate having another target over the middle of the field to go with Noah Fant. If they do that, their offense is going to look pretty good. So adding a top receiver and a defensive end in the first round is a strategy I could very much see the Seahawks following.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of piggybacking on Walt and Jacob's comments there, when we do these mocks, and same with the mocks on the site, we're projecting what we think teams will do, not what we think they should do. So because that, we're trying to give readers insight that way as to what we think it will actually happen. So with 21, I think the Chargers have a few different ways they could go, but I could see them taking Mazi Smith, the defensive tackle from Michigan. They really have needed a big body disruptor in the middle of that defensive line the past few years. Jerry Tillery didn't work out. And Smith is really going to help their interior run defense. And while he will never be a prolific pass rusher, I think he can get enough of a push where he's going to help the edge rushers in terms of not giving quarterbacks room to step up in the pocket. So Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa can chase them down. So I like that fit for the Chargers at 21.
So I'm on the clock with the Ravens at 22. It's kind of clear that the Ravens don't have much at receiver. They had Rashad Bateman there last year, and he was kind of banged up. And once he went down, they really had nothing. Like they're relying on Demarcus Robinson, which is kind of a disaster. Unless you were playing in the DraftKings and you enjoyed the $3,500 receiver and getting 12 points every week. But for the Ravens here, I think they take Zay Flowers. They've been linked to him. They've shown a lot of interest in him. Maybe it's a smokescreen and perhaps they like another receiver, but I think he just makes so much sense for them as a replacement for Marquise Brown. And Flowers could definitely go earlier than this. I feel like the four receivers are kind of grouped together and can kind of go in any order, really. And so even Jordan Addison would make a lot of sense here as well. But I think the Ravens go Flowers.
Yeah, I actually bet Flowers to be the first receiver off the board. I think at 8-1 odds. He was the longest of the bunch, so I was like, why not give that a shot? It's possible. I don't know that it's probable, but teams have different boards on receivers. We see it every year. I'm going to keep this mini run on receivers going. The Vikings here, they could take a cornerback, but they have a couple guys they drafted last year, and they signed Byron Murphy, so I kind of think that they're going to see what Flores can do with them. Jordan Addison's the top receiver left. As you said, Walt, he could be the first receiver off the board. We know he was prolific at Pitt with Kenny Pickett, and then he went to USC, and he balled out with Caleb Williams too. I don't think he was healthy all the time, so his numbers weren't quite as strong, but he's just another really strong Pitt and USC receiver who's going to come into the league, and he'll be a great number 2 across from Justin Jefferson, who replaced Adam Thielen, who was cut, and he should have more upside at this point and keep KJ Osborne in that nice third wide receiver role. So I like how the Vikings offense shakes up if they get Addison here.
And with the 24th pick, I'd have the Jags go with Keely Ringo, cornerback from Georgia. Big, fast, has issues and change of direction, but he fits the cornerbacks that the Jaguars have liked. He's very similar to Tyson Campbell, who they drafted at the top of the second round a couple years ago. They cut Griffin, so obviously they could use some more help there at cornerback. So I think Ringo would be the picks for the Jags.
All right, so with the Giants going to go with another cornerback, I think they're kind of upset that all the receivers are off the board. I suspect they may trade up for a receiver, but if they can't get a receiver, I think they go cornerback. They're pretty hurt at the position. Tyreek Stevenson, it makes sense, I think, here for the Giants. He's he has some character concerns, but he has a lot of upside. He's a big cornerback, very speedy, and I think that some team is going to fall in love with him and take him near the end of the first round. So I think the Giants may be upset, and if they can't get a receiver, maybe they trade down. But Tyreek Stevenson makes sense for them at 25.
Yeah, I was fully ready for the Cowboys to give them a defensive tackle here, but we still haven't had a tight end come off the board, so I'm going to give them Michael Mayer. Look, Dalton Schultz went to the Texans in the offseason. I know that they got some solid production out of Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot in a relief action last year, but Mayer has a lot of upside. He could be a really strong starting tight end. There were times when he was mocked as a top 10 pick. I always think that's a little rich for tight ends. Teams don't value the position as much. But I think in terms of best player available, you can make the case for him here. You can make the case for a couple other defensive players. I have Brian Bresee on my board here as a guy that the Cowboys could target because they could just use some extra help with defensive tackles so that they don't have to rely on their linebackers to stop the run so much. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Michael Mayer here. I think it's just too good of a value, and Jerry Jones will kind of fall in love with the idea of giving Dak Prescott another weapon like he always does in the first round.
And the Bills here at pick 27. Strong roster, so they could go a variety of ways. But I'm going to have them grab Osiris Torrance, the guard from Florida. They could use more talent on the offensive line, improve the protection for Josh Allen, improve the ability to run the ball with James Cook. So I think Torrance late in the first round getting the top guard in the draft, if you consider Skoronski a tackle, is quality value there for the Bills. So that makes sense to me for the Bills to take Torrance at 27.
So the Bengals are up on the clock, and they lost Hayden Hurst. I feel like they want a tight end. They wanted Trey McBride last year in the second round, but he didn't get to them. And now they really don't have much of the position outside of Irv Smith, whom they signed today. But Smith has been someone who can't stay healthy. They really can't rely on him. And I think that signing was basically – I feel like that signing telegraphed that they wanted a tight end, but Smith is kind of like the insurance option or policy just in case they can't get the tight end they want. I have them drafting Dalton Kincaid here. I feel like they can go in a variety of ways. There's so many tight ends. Charlie posted a hot press writing that there could be a run, or teams expect that there's going to be a run on tight ends in the second round. And so the Bengals can get ahead of that. The Bengals draft at the end of the second round, obviously, so they can't wait on a tight end if they really want one. And Kincaid is, you could argue that he's the best tight end available.
I prefer Darnell Washington to the Bengals, but I think Kincaid's probably the consensus better prospect. But I'm going to be pushing the Darnell Washington to the Bengals narrative until draft day. So just be ready for that on our future podcasts.
Nice.
Wrapping up my picks here, since it's only a 31 pick first round, thanks to the Dolphins tampering charges. I have the Saints on the clock. I think that they're probably going to look for defensive line help here with the top two running backs off the board. They need to improve their pass rush a little bit. They could go tackle, or they could go with an edge rusher. I have Nolan Smith penciled in here right now. He blew up the combine from Georgia. I think that he's going to be a really good pro. It seems like he's a high character individual, relentless motor, and he kind of fell off in terms of draft consideration because of an injury that impacted him the latter half of the year. But I think his character is going to stand out to teams, and I could see the Saints, a team that's valued pass rushers and it seems to value high character. would go after him at this point. So I think this is a good option for them. They could also trade down. This could be a spot where a team moves up if there is a run on tight ends to get one, or maybe some team falls in love with Hendon Hooker and he sneaks into the back end of the first round. I don't know that that's likely, but we've seen weirder things happen at the quarterback position.
And with the Eagles at pick 30, I think they'd be disappointed to miss out on Osiris Torrance, as Walt has in his mock, just given losing Isaac Seumalo. But I think in some ways they could still find a good value there with Jalen Duncan, the tackle from Maryland. They could start him out at guard, and he has a great skill set and the upside where he could move to tackle and be a long-term replacement for Lane Johnson. So they start him out at guard, develop him, and potentially have a tackle in-house ready to go in the future. So I'd have the Eagles go with Duncan at 30. And as Walt said, they always look to address the lines, defensive and offensive line. So I think, having taken Lucas Van Ness earlier in the draft, there should be some good offensive line options for them at pick 30.
Yeah, and the Chiefs could also go tackle at 31. They lost Orlando Brown to free agency. I know they got a replacement, but they also lost the right tackle as well. So they need to fill a tackle position. Anton Harrison is someone I wouldn't suspect that would go in the first round in most simulations, but given that teams will definitely reach on tackles because the position is so important, I feel like he could sneak into the end of the first round. So I think he makes a lot of sense. I have them taking Jalen Duncan in my mock. So I feel like if they like him a lot, then they'll be scrambling here because taking what is the seventh tackle, not ideal at the end of the first round, but they've had worse picks like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So okay, yeah, that's the first round of our mock. Jacob is going to lead off with the second round, and then we'll go through rounds 3 through 7 after that, and that'll take hours. So let's not do that. We do have some questions though. We'll get to Corey says, do you guys really believe Ron Rivera when he says the Commanders are not interested in drafting a quarterback? Do they really feel comfortable rolling with Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett? Jacob and Charlie, what do you think about this?
Yeah, no, I do believe Ron Rivera when he says this. I think because they're not really positioned to get any quarterback except Levis, they're not really going to be that interested because there's no guarantee that he's going to be better than Sam Howell, who they've been able to see for a full year, and Jacoby Brissett, who played very well for the Browns last year. I know they didn't win a lot of games with him, but was not the offense's fault. He kept them afloat and did very well. The other thing is with the Commanders being sold potentially, Ron Rivera and company know that they're going to be on the hot seat if a new owner takes over. So they kind of have to have success this year. They can't be affording to spend valuable resources on a young quarterback that they don't know personally that well. Because if things go downhill, then they're probably not going to be back. And yeah, you could say the same thing about Howell and Brissett, but Brissett is proven and they know Howell. So I think he's going to roll with them in a competition. Maybe they pick up an extra guy in the middle rounds of the draft, but I don't think they take a quarterback early.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Rivera was honest there because of what Jacob said. Just the value at 16 really isn't going to be there, and it would just cost a huge amount for them to go from 16 to 3 with the Cardinals if they wanted to get Anthony Richardson. So I don't see Washington doing that. And I think, like Jacob said, they're on the hot seat. So it'd be hard to trust a rookie to come in and help them where they can roll with Howell and Brissett and find another starter for the secondary at pick 16 to try and help them to win now.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I mean, if they were in position to get one of the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft, they would do it. But they like slinging Sammy Howell, and he looked good in that one game at the end. So yeah, I think they roll with him. All right. Do you guys think Lamar Jackson will play for Baltimore this season? I kind of answered that earlier. I think that the Colts may trade for him. I think they will move Lamar Jackson. I think they're kind of sick of trying to negotiate with him, and I think they believe Jackson's asking for too much. Like all that guaranteed money, you just can't pay that for a quarterback, especially one who hasn't been able to stay healthy the past 2 years. So I think he gets moved to the Colts. What do you guys think?
I also think he gets moved to the Colts. The Colts are just so well positioned to do this, and they've been in quarterback hell since Andrew Luck retired, surprisingly, before the 2019 season. They've had a different quarterback start for them in week one each of the seasons since then, and this will be the fifth. So I think at least with Lamar Jackson, you get him, and yeah, does he have a little durability concern in recent years? Yeah, but every year in week one you're going to start him. So unless there's a major regression or a really, really bad injury, I think you go with him. So I think the Colts will eventually say, hey, we're going to get him. We're going to give him the same amount of guaranteed money that Kyler Murray got. And is this a big risk? Sure, but is it worth it for us right now as opposed to trying to roll with Anthony Richardson and trying to develop him? At least we know that Lamar has an MVP quality in him if he can, just stay healthy. So that's my thought process right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Colts make a lot of sense. I think for them, it makes more sense to to do the trade for Jackson than take Richardson because Jackson's the proven commodity. Richardson is so extremely raw. The inaccuracy in the short to intermediate part of the field is scary. He does not have an understanding of how to play the position. He's all skill set and upside. So he's a big developmental project. And I think when you look at the Colts roster, it's really ready to win right now. They have a lot of talent on defense. They have a veteran offensive line that's really good. So that would be an upgrade there for Lamar Jackson. You have talented running back and Jonathan Taylor, some good young talent at receiver that are entering their prime years. So I think they have the right ingredients there where it really, if you consider they would take a quarterback at 4, it's really only costing them one additional first-round pick if they're giving up 2 first-round picks for him. So I think that's if I'm sitting in the Colts position, I'd rather do that trade for Lamar than gamble that Anthony Richardson is being able to taught how to become an accurate quarterback.
Yeah. So there's all the questions we had. I actually had one question for you guys. I was actually talking to Scott from Play Like a Jet last night, and it was brought up that the Packers were trying to get 2 second-round picks, and the second rounder from next year could turn into a first rounder for Aaron Rodgers. Now, my thinking is this: like, if the Packers are asking for that much, and I don't think the Jets will comply, do you think it would be better for the Jets to go after Lamar Jackson because instead of a second and a first, they'd have to give up 2 firsts. Now, they'd have to give more money overall to Jackson in the long run, but they're going to be paying Rodgers a lot of money. And we have one more question after this, but what do you guys think about that? Like, would you, if you're the Jets, like, would you suddenly, if that's the asking price, would you suddenly go, hey, let's just get Lamar Jackson?
So in the immediate aftermath of the trade, I posed this possibility. I broke down Lamar's top 7 landing spots on sportingnews.com, and the Jets made the cut at number 3. Colts were number 1. Patriots were number 2 just because Bill Belichick's the type of guy who would absolutely, I feel like, make this type of trade. The contracts, what I'm not sure about there, but he was very complimentary of Lamar Jackson last year, like almost suspiciously so. So I think you can't rule that out. But I wrote the Jets because I was like, hey, at the very least, they could gain leverage in talks with the Packers if they called up the Ravens and said, hey, we'll think about trading for Lamar Jackson. I know Joe Douglas said at the owners meeting that would be negotiating in bad faith. So they're going to try to go through this plan for trying to get Aaron Rodgers. But if that continues to be a stalemate, a tug of war type of deal where the Packers aren't willing to capitulate, because now the Jets have the leverage now that Lamar is available. If they get frustrated enough with the Packers, they could just be like, look, we're going to go get Lamar Jackson because you guys aren't cooperating enough. So I think it would be better from a long-term perspective for the Jets. I think Lamar Jackson would do very well there, and he'd have a lot of weapons there. That team would be dynamic with him. But yeah, no, it doesn't sound like they're going to do it. But hey, if we check back next month and Aaron Rodgers still hasn't been traded before the draft, maybe the Jets will get in on the Lamar sweepstakes.
Yeah, I definitely would if I were the Jets. Just pursue Lamar Jackson because I'm thinking long term here, where Aaron Rodgers could play one more season and then decide to retire, and you really have nothing to show for potential day 2 picks, which teams view as future starters. In the AFC, even if they get Aaron Rodgers, the conference is so loaded and so challenging to navigate that there's no guarantee that he's going to automatically thrust them into, the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs or the Bills or Bengals. It's just going to be a really tough slog to get there. So I think taking the long-term view, Lamar makes a lot more sense for the Jets. So if I were the Jets, I would definitely be looking into that.
Okay. Yeah. I think that makes so much sense. So I think the asking price will go down eventually. A question from Derek: what do you think Green Bay will do in the NFL draft in 2023? Tight end or receiver, edge rusher or safety? So in our mock, I forget what happened.
Brian Branch, we had him.
Yeah, Charlie, that's right. You took Brian Branch. So I think I obviously receiver makes a lot of sense. Tight end, I think that's going to be too early. Maybe if they trade down, they take a tight end. I think edge rusher makes a lot of sense too, because they had a blitz a lot last year. So I think they'd want to get a better edge rush. So I think receiver, edge rush, safety definitely are definitely in play for Green Bay.
Yeah, I think if they fall in love with one of the receivers at 15, they might take them because, as you mentioned, it's not a deep receiver class. I think there's more depth at tight end. There's more depth at edge rusher. We had a lot of edge rushers go in the first round of our mock, and there are 3 or 4 tight ends that I could see going in the first round, or at least early in the second. So I think those positions are deeper. And I think safety, it's easier to find quality starters in the middle rounds of the draft. So I think if they fall in love with the receiver, I think they'll go with it. But really, any of those positions make sense. And I like the Brian Branch pick and fit there. They love their versatile defensive backs out in Green Bay. That's where Micah Hyde went at the beginning of his career, and that turned out to be a good pick for them. So I can see Brian Branch doing the same thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely think safety is a top consideration. I think edge rusher would definitely be one to consider. I think there's a little more depth there, as the guys said. And I think wide receiver maybe is kind of a sneaky sleeper one. They've really resisted taking a receiver in the first round, but just because they've done that in the past doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. Teams break their kind of trends and history every year in the draft. So with Jordan Love, obviously this regime needs him to play well, or they're going to be on the hot seat, if not fired, before too long, if that pick doesn't work out. So getting him a weapon, I can see that being something that they would be inclined to do if they really loved one of the receivers like Quentin Johnston or Jackson Smith-Njigba. But I think looking at their draft as a whole, they probably end up with better value going with a safety first and then looking at tight end, edge rusher on day 2.
Okay, and last one here. Actually, I'll take this because I just talked about it. Can the Packers get 2 second-round picks to trade Aaron Rodgers to the Jets? I don't think it's going to happen. I know there was a report from Charles Robinson last night that this will happen, but I think that was from the Packers. I think they're leaking that to try to drive up the price. The Packers just don't have leverage because, first of all, the draft's coming up. Second, Rodgers he has a huge contract. He's 40. He's injured last year, and who knows, he may not play after the season. And hey, maybe during the season he quits and goes to host Jeopardy. I feel like the Packers have no leverage here. I think the Jets have all the leverage. I think the trade will be a third rounder and then a third that could turn into a second. I know that Jets don't have a third rounder at the moment, but they could always get one by moving up. So I think that's what the compensation will be, a third and then a conditional third that can turn into a second. So yeah, that is it for our mock draft. Thanks guys for joining us. It was a blast to do this with you guys. Hopefully we get one more going here before the draft. So Jacob and then Charlie, do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Camenker. I've been trying to tweet out all my work lately. Lots of stuff on Lamar Jackson coming out of the owners' meetings, top landing spots, just all the news you can want. It's over on my Twitter. It's over on sportingnews.com. We'll be covering all your NFL needs. We've got NCAA tournament stuff, and opening day for baseball is apparently Thursday. I did not know that until probably yesterday. So, we've got all sorts of stuff coming up. So check out sportingnews.com for all the latest and greatest sports news out there.
Yep, and you can follow me on Twitter at Draft Campbell. Definitely, we're gonna just have tons and tons of updates going up on Walter Football in every day leading up to the draft. We'll have hot presses and rumors coming up from what we're hearing from team sources. Of course, our mocks getting updated weekly and expanded to eventually be all 7 rounds. The position rankings are getting updated constantly and scouting reports galore. So tons of content there and everything to get you ready for the draft.
Awesome. Please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store, and also visit the link for Stochastic. If you play DFS, you have to get on Stochastic. Like I said, I've been with them for 4 years. I've won many tournaments with using their projections. And if anything, you could look at their ownership data and see if you're playing bad chalk, or you could try to get a low-owned kind of a low-owned player who can help you win a tournament. So yeah, check out Stochastic, and thanks so much, guys, once again for joining us at walterfootball.com. We have tons of content, as Charlie said, draft content, but not just draft content. We graded every single free agent signing. We're gonna have updated power rankings soon. We're gonna have team free agent grades. Will be up as soon as I think that most of the signings are done, which probably we're close to being so. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun month. I can't wait for the draft, and I'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
Take care.